Welcome. I am Johnita Stanton. We have Reginald Perryman, Shaka Williams, and we are Tasari. This is a There's Something About Real Estate podcast where we talk all things real estate. And tonight we have with us special guest, Wendy Patton.
Hello.
What up?
What is it? Top
You're
selling
our
author?
Michigan or Detroit MREI
Yep.
author. I can't pronounce certain words, but you wrote some books or a book.
A few.
Yes.
Right.
Some books. So you're going to tell us a little bit about that stuff, right?
Sure.
Okay.
Whatever you want to know. Whatever I can share.
A lot.
Yeah. But before we jump into that, how's everybody been today?
Doing great. The cold weather and all that good stuff.
Finally
Tomorrow's
snowing.
first day of winter, right? December 21st.
Oh, yeah.
Finally getting some. Hey, I'm not complaining because we did good for a long time here in Michigan.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
and it's still
That's
not that
good.
bad. But
It always snows. If I'm coming into town, don't worry, it'll always snow. Every time when I have our meetings, I fly in and it's like, oh, of course it snowed for me. They're like, oh, yeah, it was 50 degrees last week. Oh, not today.
Right. Because Wendy's here, right?
Mm-hmm. But Wendy, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started.
Well, okay. I started in 1985, kind of. Okay. I went to University of Colorado. I was born and raised on the Air Force Academy. So my dad was, an officer in the Air Force. He was a coach at the academy. And we never got relocated as a military brat, So I lived there my whole life and went to the University of Colorado. When I graduated, I got this great job in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
Here I am still, right?
Colorado.
Okay.
Right.
So anyways, I got this job in Michigan, and right before I was leaving, my mom said, hey, Wendy, I got something for you before you leave. I'm thinking it's something really cool. Well, it really was cool, but it wasn't what I was expecting. She said, I went to this real estate seminar thing the other night, and I bought this real estate course and brought it home, and there's just this one big problem at home. And I go, what? She goes, it's your dad. He's not cool with this. He doesn't want to do this real estate investing thing. So I am giving this to you when you go to Michigan, and I want you to do something with it for me.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
That's how it started. And so the whole way I was listening in the car, because I was driving, and I don't even know whose course it was. I think it got lost in the move.
Goodness.
But probably one of the guys back from the 80s, one of those.
Carlton Sheets.
Yeah, probably Carlton.
Right.
It wasn't Carlton, I don't think, but
Okay.
maybe Dave Del Dotto or one of those. I don't even remember who it was. But yes, that idea, that time frame. And I remember when I got to Michigan, I thought, oh, I don't really want to work. I want to do this investing thing. Like, this is really cool. I'm excited about it. But I did start my job, and one of the things that mentioned in there was, if you're serious about investing, get involved in a real estate investor group. So that's not when I started my group here, but that's when I joined one
Okay.
in 1985.
Wow.
And at the time I bought my first property. Well, my company had moved in 15,000 people into Metro Detroit. So there was nowhere for us to live. So we had a 6 to 9 month wait list for any apartment anywhere Metro Detroit
Wow.
in 1985. So we were all in hotels and motels. I got the Red Roof Inn, and my friends got the Hilton.
Oh.
Don't ask me why. I mean, it just was random. I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, Red Roof Inn room 101. That's where I was, really. Anyway, so I remember this thing said, join the real estate investor group. So I'll go to the investor group, and they're like, well, where do you live? And I'm like, Red Roof Inn. And they said, what? And I said, yeah, that's where I live. Anyway, so bottom line is they said, why don't you just buy a house? And I go, me? Like, I can't buy a house. You kidding me? Like, I mean, I'm broke. Like, I have no money. I have debt. I make like $10 an hour at the time it was, with a degree, And it really hit me. Someone at the table that evening said to me, well, so?
Right.
And I had that look like, what do you mean, so? And they're like, well, what's your real excuse, And I didn't know that that you could buy money without, houses without, with all of those things at the time. So I did end up buying my first house with a mortgage, but I borrowed the down payment on my credit card because I didn't have any money, which you were allowed to do then because they didn't season your funds. Initially, mortgages didn't at the time. And when I bought this 3-bedroom house in St. Clair Shores.
Okay.
I was able to rent 2 of the bedrooms to 2 ladies in the motel.
So she was house
Yeah.
hacking.
Hacking.
She was doing all
And
that.
now they call it house hacking.
Yeah, it's like all these new terms for
Are
it.
you
It's like,
kidding me?
Right.
That's so funny. I'm like, really? How about just renting rooms in your house? But
Right.
anyway, so my payment, my PITI was $438 a month.
Mm.
And my roommates paid $250 each. So they were paying the whole thing. And the $62 a month went toward my credit card payment. And I was living free.
Okay.
Oh,
So that's how I got
sweet.
started. Yeah.
All right.
And then I was like, oh, this is easy. I'll just do it again and again and again and again. And I didn't know what we might talk about, which is lease options, subject twos, really creative financing. I didn't know about that then. So I was borrowing on my credit cards. I have, you guys, you should see them, except I lost them. But I had kept on my credit cards for years. When I used to speak around the country, I had them in these little like fold out things, that we used to put in our wallet with all the photos. Well, I taped them all together, and it really literally went from like the front of an audience all the way to the back row, down the road, And I was making $10 an hour, and I just kept applying. They'd send me, once you get one, hey, do you want to apply for ours? Yeah. How much do you make? $10 an hour or whatever. And they kept giving them to me. I'm like, what is wrong with these people? I just have $200,000 in credit card debt or something at one time. And it was 25% then. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. You kind of piggybacked on something I suggested for starting new someplace in our last show. But where are we going next?
With the lease options, because you mentioned the
Yeah.
lease
Yes.
options. And that's like, so you wrote a book on lease options.
Yep.
And for a while, no one could find the book.
My book?
Yeah. I
What?
think people were like, they couldn't find it or something. Did
Oh,
you
because
stop
it was-
publishing it?
So I published it originally in 2005.
Okay.
And people were saying that they were having a hard time getting it. And it was like
Right.
$200, $300, $400, sometimes $500. I'm like, really? That sounds kind of cool. Like,
Yeah, because it was like
But
on
that was
eBay or
ridiculous.
something, right?
So then I republished it last year.
Okay.
And came out with a new edition. So it's on Amazon, easy to get, but now it's current. The original one was really good still, but it had things like how to read the newspapers and get deals. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I had to update it to 2023,
Right.
2024.
Find an MLS book, that
Yeah.
type of stuff. Right.
Exactly. Yes. Reggie.
What's
You
the
know,
name
you
of the
know.
book, Wendy?
What's that?
What's the name of the book?
Investing in real estate with lease options and subject twos.
Right.
And it's on Amazon. You could just put Wendy Patton in Amazon, you'll see it. But make sure it's the one from 2023,
Okay.
not 2025 or 2005.
Right. Okay.
Unless you want to like read that one and then see the updates.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
But that one would be used and it'd be yeah. So anyway, so I then learned how to buy things. I think I must have gone to some seminar somewhere, right? About creatively thinking differently. And I thought I was pretty creative, which, for credit card wasn't bad. I never missed a payment.
Right.
I paid off all those credit cards, but it was only because of the grace of God and also because of the real estate. You know how good it is, right? I mean, when you can flip a house and make 50 grand or 40 grand,
Right.
people come to me and they go, like, I'm in debt 10 grand. I go, really? Good. That's awesome. That's nothing.
Right.
Let me help you.
Maybe
That's
$10.
like, you could wholesale a deal for that. Don't even put any money in it. But people do not realize the power of real estate, right? And then once I really started learning how to buy without using money or credit, which was primarily lease. I started primarily with lease options. And because I didn't have any more credit cards, that's probably why I started that way. And so I would option a property, from an owner and have the right to buy it within a certain time period. And then I would do what's called a sandwich lease option most of the time.
Okay.
Most of the time. So there's a couple different ways of doing a lease option, but I typically did the sandwich lease option, whereas, I might buy from you, say, Shaka, you're the seller. Juanita, you're the buyer, and I'm in the middle, right? So you're going to sell it to me for whatever we agree on, It's a monthly payment, a purchase price, a certain time period, but a longer time period that I'm going to sell to you, and it's going to be a shorter time period. You're going to put more down, and it's going to be a bigger price. And I'm still in the middle, so I'm making cash flow. It's kind of like I am a landlord.
Right.
I am a landlord, and I'm getting that spread between the two. So in the very beginning, I'm going to get your down payment. We don't call it a down payment. We call it an option fee to be technically correct. And that option fee gets applied to your purchase price.
Okay, so let's back up a little bit and talk about what's the definition of a lease option.
So a lease option is when you lease a property from an owner
Right.
with the option to buy it,
Right.
not the obligation. And that's where it makes it a little bit different than everything else. It's not the obligation, it's the right, it's the privilege, it's the ability to buy it.
At
Okay.
a certain time for a
With-
certain dollar amount.
Within I usually get 3 to 5 years. That's kind of my sweet spot. And most of mine have always been like 3 to 5 years. Sometimes people give you 10 or 20 years.
Whatever you
Or
negotiate.
till the mortgage is. It's all negotiable. Yeah.
Okay, hold
90
on.
I
But
wanna
it-
say
I'm gonna
something.
just-
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we are. All our brains start
no,
clicking,
no.
right?
So she said. So all right, because she said a lot right there, right? So I think let's go. So the reason she called that a sandwich lease option, right? So I guess we should start at the basic lease
Yeah, yeah,
option.
Well, that's
right?
what she. So I backed her up. She
Just a
explained
lease
she-
option to start with. Yeah.
Yep.
right. So
Yep.
she just explained the basic lease option.
Mhm.
Just a basic. That's really its simplest format. Actually, we think about like what's a lease option. An option is actually a purchase agreement. A sales contract is an option,
Right.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's not a lease option usually, but it is a option to buy.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just a short time period usually, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so this is just kind of a bigger thought of, okay, now I also have the right to use it during that time period. I could live in it. I could rent it out. I'm paying a monthly fee, just like our tenants would to us, to lease it with that underlying like first right of refusal,
Right.
basically.
Okay.
So now she
Option
went
to
to some
buy
of the
it.
pros. But
Right.
go ahead.
So okay. So you kind of went right into. So I'm going to have you, since you brought up the sandwich lease, we're going to have you explain that, and
Okay,
then
good.
I'll ask. them.
Okay, good. So a sandwich lease is when you put two of those kind of deals, lease options together, but one with the seller. So it's a pro seller deal. My seller I'm buying from my seller. I have a contract with my seller.
Right.
And then I have a new completely different contract, which is pro seller, because I'm the
Right.
seller now, with my tenant buyer.
Yep.
And it's the same house, the same legal description, but different. I use different contracts.
Mhm.
So I literally, because I've done this for years, I have pro buyer, pro seller contracts. And that's what I used to teach on when I would speak and teach people and I would sell my contracts and different things.
Right.
But that's the simplest way to kind of describe it. And I always think about what makes a sandwich so good. Well, it's the meat in the middle.
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to get is that meat in the middle, and then maybe a couple slices of cheese and pickles and whatever else you like, right? And those are like the little bonuses that you can add into a lease option, because you can make a lease option very simple and you can make it very complex if you want. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to it. That's why I love them. I love lease options. I love subject tos. I love land contracts that we have in Michigan. That anything that you can kind of put together something that takes a little more thought than just price and closing.
Right.
Right.
So would you agree or disagree that a sandwich lease option is subletting?
Yeah, you would be
Yeah.
subletting. Yes. So in my contract with the seller, they know I'm not going to live there, right? I mean, this is just like if you're a wholesaler, your seller should know you're probably not going to be the one buying it. You could be, but you're probably not going to be.
Well,
Right.
that's what I was going to ask. Do you let the seller know that?
Yeah.
Because a lot of that's
Always.
the thing with the wholesale
And it's in
deal.
wking.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so you're upfront. So at the beginning,
Absolutely.
you're telling them, hey, I'm going to sublease this property, or I'm going to lease option this. I'm buying it from you on a lease option, and I'm going to probably sell it on a lease option. You're telling them.
I don't tell them that whole part.
Okay.
You're
So
basically
that's-
I tell the
saying-
truth,
you tell-
just not the whole truth.
Okay.
You're telling them you're gonna have an option in there for you to rent it out where you can
Yes.
sublease it.
Yep.
They don't know you're subleasing it with an option to buy,
Right.
pretty much.
And I might not always sublet it.
Right.
I'm always going to sublet it.
Mhm.
I just may not sublet it with an option.
Gotcha.
Right.
And the reason is because it depends on what I negotiated with the seller.
Mhm.
Right.
And that's hopefully we'll talk about some of those things you can negotiate, because those are what make that sandwich really juicy in the middle, right?
Right.
And it's those little things that you can ask for from the seller.
Mhm.
But when you're talking to the seller, typically I try to build rapport first. This is the way I've always worked. I mean, I've been doing it almost 40 years. It's just, to me, I'm not a slick salesperson. I'm not a better sign it today or else, I'm out of here. Anyone who does that with me doesn't work. So I just build relationships,
Right.
and I try to be very honest with them and try to build rapport when I go in. So I might go to their house first. I'm going to walk through it. This is the way I do it. I will walk through it. and look at it as if they might assume that very second that I might be living there. But I'm going to ask them questions and I'm going to compliment them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not going to typically try to insult them about their house, especially I'm going to feel out their style
Right.
and their motivation.
Right.
Just like you guys probably do with every deal you buy, right? If you can deal directly with the seller, right?
Right.
She said
So
she's not
I'm
going
trying
in
to
there
figure it
saying,
out.
this is old, you got to take this out, you got to take that
Oh,
out.
I hate
that-
when investors do
And
that.
if they lived
or
there 30
buyers.
years,
yeah.
the sellers would just be like, you're not buying my house. I don't like you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know like how much
Yeah.
that means. And so I will try to find things I really like. Oh my gosh, I just love these old hardwood floors. These are amazing. You know, this is a beautiful home. I'm trying to build relationship.
Yeah.
I am going to point out things that are negative just so that if they later, when we discuss the pricing and the terms, that I'm not ignoring the fact that there's a leak in the roof, you
Mhm.
know,
Right.
that is going to come up. I would do it probably in a very kind way where I would just say, hey, you know, I noticed that stain on the ceiling. Like, is your roof leaking? What's going on there?
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that, you know, and, you know, so I am building the relationship with them. But during that time, somewhere they were going to say like, well, when are you going to move in or when do you want to move in? Then I would try to find the right opportunity where I could just lay the cards on the table.
Right.
Actually, I probably am not going to be moving in. I work with a lot of people that need a home like this. And so but I would be the one renting it from you
Mm-hmm.
and I'm the one that would be paying you. But I work with a lot of families who, you know, need something like this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just change the subject. Like, so I just try to zip to the next thing
Right.
and not to like be rude to them, but just to like, I don't want them, like, I don't want to stop and go, whoa,
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was going to
They're
ask next.
overthinking
Like,
it.
do you typically find people being a little weary of the subletting part? Like, you know,
It
we
could
really
be.
don't want that in our contract.
Yeah. And you know what, I would say, oh gosh, I would ask them, I would say, gosh, you know, if they said like, I'm not comfortable with that, I'd say, well, let's talk about that. What part are you not comfortable with?
Mm-hmm.
And I let them answer because they might be uncomfortable with something that I'm not even thinking,
Right.
Right.
you know?
Mhm.
Right.
Like, and these are some of those objections, you know, like I have in my book, I talk about these things because this will come up where someone might say that. And then I'd say, well, what makes you most uncomfortable? Well, what if they don't pay? That could be one of them.
Mhm.
Well, then my answer is like, oh yeah, that'd be a bummer. Cause guess what? They're not paying me because I'm paying you,
Yeah.
Right.
you know?
Right.
What other objection, you know, what other things are your concerns? You know, that might be the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or they may say, well, what if they trash the house?
Right.
And then I go, well, first of all, I'm responsible too. But let me ask you a question. What do you mean when you think of trashing the house?
Mm-hmm.
For them, it could be that there's a red stain in the carpet that's trashed. To me, it means like the cabinets are missing and there's holes in the wall, you know. And so I will answer their question differently when I understand what they mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I'm always looking for what do they mean by that question? You know, to try to dig in a little deeper.
Do you find that maybe it's more of a control thing? So like they didn't have a chance to vet they were able to meet you, vet you, feel comfortable with you, but this other person, we don't know that person.
Truthfully, most of the time, by the time I have a relationship with them, I think they trust the fact that I never put it on the other person.
Right.
It's always me. Buck stops here. So I leave it on me. So they say, well, you know, what if they don't do this? I hear what you're saying. It's just me you have to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I'm totally responsible. If there's one bit of damage on that home and I don't buy it, it'll be coming back to you equal or better than the way you left it from me.
Because you negotiated that in your lease option.
Because that's
Right.
the way it
Okay.
is. That's the way I take care of things.
Mm.
And it would be a bummer if that happened because I would have to deal with it.
Mm.
You don't have to deal with it. That's the beauty of working with me. You don't ever have to think about that. And so I just try to take their mind off of it. And then if I can kind of answer that and slip into something else that's positive, like, or maybe sometimes negative, like, so when did you say you're moving to Florida again?
Mm.
Right.
When was that you're moving? Like, oh, where is it you're moving in Florida?
Mm.
You know,
You
I'm going to
gotta
bring their
get-
mind off of it a little bit because I don't want them focusing on the negative if I can keep it from them.
Right.
Even though if I can see that it's not answering the question they want to go back to it, I'll go back to it.
So you kind of redirect their focus back to their main objective, which was, hey, we're doing this because we need to move or we don't want to cover the mortgage anymore or whatever the reason is.
Right.
That's
Most of the
nice.
Yeah, remember, we're only working with motivated sellers.
Yeah.
Right.
They're not, there's one thing different with motivated sellers and distressed sellers. And I only work with motivated sellers for lease options.
Right.
Because distressed sellers are not the best ones to work with. Because if they're distressed, I think of distressed as they're behind in payments or they've got liens or judgments or they're going through, something that could cause a financial issue.
Right.
That's not what we're looking for with a lease option. That's actually the opposite. Because they could script the title. And when you do a lease option, you don't have title. So you don't want the seller to screw it up.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you protect yourself from that? I didn't even think
Well,
about
because I'm only working with strong sellers. I really am looking for the person that's moving from the $200,000 home to the $500,000.
Right.
Mhm.
So
That's who I'm looking for. That's they're motivated because they already moved.
for sure.
And they didn't
Can
sell
I-
that one yet.
Can I say something? So to simplify this, what it really sounds like is the sandwich lease option is if you have 5 years here on this end, you're going to do 3 years on this end. So
Or one
you're
and a half.
always so you're always covering the spread.
Got it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of to simplify it, it's really like wholesaling a lease agreement because your
what it sounds like.
contract here,
I
then
know.
you got an end contract here, and you're just covering the middle.
Similar, except the
Yeah.
wholesale, you step out of it and there's only one contract.
Exactly.
This is really a double closing usually. Although,
Right.
again, this is way more complex than we can get to in this podcast. But there are ways to actually step out later and still get your money and make it a single. It's just, and my contracts are actually set up that way with my seller. So if I, am going to do a deal with the seller, they're going to be open to renegotiating that contract at the very end as long as they still get the same amount of money.
Gotcha.
Nice.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yep.
I want to know how you said something about protecting yourself. This is a lease option.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You are not on
That's right.
title.
You're not on the title. So
So,
there's a couple things you can do. Right. One is you're vetting your seller just like they're vetting you. Except that they usually don't vet you if they really feel comfortable with you. Because they don't vet me the same way that they might
Somebody feels
regular
that
tenant.
if they were a
sneaky.
true landlord. These are
Yeah.
not true landlords usually. These are homeowners.
Right.
Okay. So they don't know how to run someone's credit or that all the things you're supposed to get from you. This is like a little different scenario. So, the big thing is you're asking them questions too, not about their credit, but like, where are you moving? If I know that they didn't sell this one and they already bought something and I know that neighborhood, if I know that neighborhood, it's bigger, right? I'm going to check it out. I'm going to find out what they paid for it if they already closed or because I'll pull it up and, being a real estate agent, right? We could pull it
Helps
out
a lot.
and we're going to look. And then okay, they moved there. Well, if they move there and they have a mortgage there and they have a mortgage there, they qualified for both. Or the one behind is free and clear, right? So I'm looking for hints like that. What's the,
That's even scarier.
that's one thing. So if they're moving like something better or bigger, they qualify for both. They're strong financially. That's what I really want. Okay, you don't always get that, but usually they're very strong financially. Second thing is you're always, I do pull title. I always pull title. And then I also record a memorandum of lease option. Just like a memorandum of land contract, where it clouds the title so they can't sell it to somebody else. It shows the world you have that interest in it. A land contract is a little different because it's real different because you do own it. But it's the same kind of protection on the title.
Does that stop them from being able to borrow on that property?
Yeah.
It does?
Well, unless there's someone
Unless you
who,
sell-
like their uncle or someone who doesn't know that they should be pulling
from
title and seeing how much, what position they're in. But
Yeah.
they're definitely behind your option.
So with a traditional bank, they could not go out and get financing
Absolutely.
because
not.
there'd be a second lien position.
No, it's funny. Like you get the chance. Sometimes, like I've had this over the years. Of course, I got, forget about it. It's like the 5-year deal, and we're like a couple years in, and rates drop, and they're like, "Oh, I was going to refinance a home," and they go to refi, and they're like, "Wendy, we got this thing on there," and I'm like, "Oh," I go, "Yeah." I go, "What do you mean? Like you're refining?" I remember our contract says you can't refi, and they're like, "Well, man, I could drop my payment by like." I go, "How much could you drop it by?" And you know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah. Going to negotiate.
Yeah. So they go like, "I'm going to drop my payment like $700," and I go, "Well, why don't we split it?
Right.
You drop. I'll take this off for you to refi as long as you're not going to put yourself in a weird position that would jeopardize my position, and you give me a little deal on my rent too, since you're saving some.
How do you secure that, though?
Which part?
Like, it seems like you would have to take their word if you were to do a discharge.
Oh, we do an addendum.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to get it in writing.
Yes.
That when this refinances, my rent will go from $1,500 to $1,300.
Okay.
Or to $1,200.
Let me ask you this real quick. So all these documents you're discussing, were these documents you obtained or you had attorneys drafting for you?
Attorneys and about 700 properties of experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So and my attorneys helped me with those documents over the years only because we learned together, right? Someone would end up in court or someone would say, I'm going to sue you for my option fee back because I'm not going to buy it or it didn't appraise or blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've never lost one.
Okay.
And I haven't been to court a ton, but I've had a lot of people say, I'm going to take you to court. You know, I'm like, okay, if you have an attorney, tell me who your attorney is. I'll be glad to send them all the contracts that we signed. Let's let them review it first.
Right.
Because I already know they're rock solid.
Yeah. Right.
I know they're ironclad tight, you know.
For sure.
And they go away. They never, because they look at them. If they even do hire someone, they look at them and they're like, you have no chance.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's what I want. You mentioned it. I wanted to come back to that. I wanted you to explain like some of the important parts of a lease option, and one of those being the option fee.
Okay. So when you do a lease option, you could have everything. I'm going to talk about contracts for a minute and then the fee part too. But I use 3 different contracts. I like it that way. I like it very clean and clear.
Right.
A rental agreement, an option agreement, and the purchase agreement or sales contract. I like them separate, especially when you're selling.
Yeah.
Okay, when I'm working with the tenant buyer, you want those 3 things separate. Because if you have to evict them because they didn't pay, you don't want it all convoluted together where the judge is like, wait a minute, I think it looks like, smells like, feels like a land contract. Yeah. You're in the wrong court. You know, start over or go through foreclosure. I don't want that.
Definitely.
So I always have that rental agreement separate.
Sheesh.
And it not connected together.
Right.
She said so much.
Well, I mean, that makes sense because like you said, you learn from experience.
Very much experience.
So now you're like, okay, when this happened last time, we had it together. Now we need to separate it.
Yep.
But people don't understand why.
Running around to all these different courts.
Because when she said if the judge interprets that as a land contract, you're in a whole different court.
Yep.
Foreclosure.
And they're gonna treat it different.
You probably got to start over. Even though and if you're in India, you probably have listeners in other states, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. There are other states that don't even have land contracts, right?
Right.
Most attorneys are not going to understand these options by any means. Even real estate attorneys,
right?
They understand conceptually, but unless they've done a lot of them, they're just not going to have a lot of experience.
Right.
They're going to have to kind of do research or figure it out, and they might forget some things that come up, that need to be in there. But for sure, most judges do not understand lease options.
Right.
And you know how this whole thing with any kind of seller financing with Dodd-Frank and all that, you just want it separate.
Right.
So when I go to evict them or get them out, I only want that one document to be the thing that we talk about.
Right.
Because the judge will be like, you'll be like, but judge, I gave her $5,000 move in. And he looks and he goes, I don't see it on there. It's not on there. No. This is what it says on here. This is your lease, right? And they're like, yeah. Okay. But judge, I this is your lease. Did you pay or not? And they're like, So it's a lot easier when it's separate. Now, when you're buying, you could put them all together if you want. I don't. I still keep them separate just because, but they're shorter. Your rental agreement when you're lease optioning from a seller is going to be short.
Right.
Easy. Simple. It's 3 pages or 2 pages or something. I don't know. I got some of the language in there that makes it look like a real official and all that, the lead-based paint and stuff like that are required. But really the lease agreement with the tenant's going to be longer. Mine are 6 pages or something.
So you got
all kinds of stuff
agreements.
in there.
So she's got 2 lease agreements. You got in your sandwich.
They're all pro buyer, pro seller.
Right.
Every one of them. Everything's different.
And 2 options.
Because here's the other thing. I'll give you an example. And I want to talk about the option fee because I don't want to forget that question. But, so your lease agreement, I just mentioned a couple of the changes, right? For instance, I might charge a security deposit too.
Yeah.
Some judges do like to see a security deposit in there, even if it's small. because that means there's some portion of what they gave you down that's refundable. So depending on what court you're in, where you're doing this, it depends. I'm mostly in North Oakland County. Most of mine are there. Pontiac, Auburn Hills, like that kind of thing. So they're fair, I mean, Pontiac's more landlord-tenant or more tenant-friendly.
Tenant-friendly, right.
But they're fair. They're usually pretty fair. So it's not much of an issue. So I don't really have to put anything in security deposit because that means that's their money.
Right.
If I know they have an extra $500, instead of putting it there, I put it in the option fee. That's my money now.
Right.
That's non-refundable.
Yeah.
And if they do damage, then that's additional that you can go after with them because the option fee is only to get the right. It strictly goes in the option agreement and it says, I apply it toward purchase, whether I'm buying or selling.
Right.
You don't have to. It's like if you buy a stock option, you don't get to apply it toward purchasing. You just got the right to buy it. But in a lease option, I do because they kind of need that to get their mortgage.
Yeah, because that becomes their down payment, and
Usually,
that's helpful. So, like, if you had a 2-year lease option on the sandwich lease with this other tenant, and maybe they didn't have, a big down payment in year 2, but they already put $5,000 down here, but now they have 10.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Right.
It helps.
You said something very important too. You said that option fee, comparing it to a stock option, is this fee is for me to guarantee that I'm going to sell it to you at this price on these terms on or before this date.
I'll honor that.
But it also doesn't obligate them to buy it.
That's right.
Right. But
that's right.
With that, for you as the seller, is obligating you to sell it if they choose to exercise that option.
If they call you.
So I can't sell the property to anybody else, and for that reason, I want this fee.
That's right.
So that's
right.
Pretty.
So we got to keep in mind though. So she switched. So we're going back and forth. So right now she's talking about on the buyer side.
That's right. Tenant buyer. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
All right. So.
Yeah, but so it's the same thing with the seller though. It's exactly the same way, except that I don't usually put money down.
Right. I was gonna say for you because you get more.
But you have to have consideration, right?
Yeah.
So what's your consideration with the lease option? It's your lease. It's your promise to pay monthly. That's your consideration.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be money. It just has to be something valuable consideration.
Right.
But there's something very important in the option agreement with this because I'm selling something I don't actually own. I'm offering it, right? An exclusive right to buy it, but I don't really own it.
Right.
So I had to put something in my option agreement that's very clear to the tenant buyer that I do not own this property.
Right.
And if for any reason, when you go to exercise, if you choose to exercise, I cannot transfer it to you with maybe something happened to the seller, whatever. Anything that's out of my control. If I cannot transfer it to you, then I will give you back your option fee plus $500 as full and complete liquidated damages.
Right.
So my attorneys, that was one of those things years ago which I didn't have to run across, but they just said that's the issue, right?
Yeah.
So they know I'm not going to own it. They know I don't own it.
Right.
Yeah, because now you're being transparent. Okay.
And they sign off on that.
You said something. If something were to happen to the seller of the property, but doesn't your contract protect you? Because don't you have a lease option with the seller?
Yes, I do.
So if they were to pass away or something like that, you still have...
The estate would have
to honor that agreement.
Absolutely. Just like my estate has the right to keep buying it if I die.
Right.
So that doesn't affect it. What I'm thinking more with what happens to the seller if they have a huge judgment against them. All of a sudden, they have a $500,000 IRS lien that shows up on that property.
There it is.
Or something like that.
So you're saying that the liens take first right position?
IRS.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to show up on that title when they go to sell it to me. Now, now here's the thing. I mean, IRS is not always the same
that's
example.
what I'm trying to...
IRS, if it is IRS, usually they'll just take what's there, whatever the equity is, and then move that lien to that person. They're not going to usually stop it. But it could be a contractor. It could be child support. It could be any kind of lien.
Right.
Mhm.
A divorce
But-
decree lien. I mean, it could be something that
The lien can be more than
unexpected.
Okay,
right.
so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So any liens, so you have the liens that take first positions like taxes and IRS. We have those.
Yep.
Then we have other types of liens. All these liens all over the place.
Yep.
But you recorded your lease
Yep.
memorandum
Yes.
before those.
Yes.
And I guess my question is, although they're there, wouldn't they still have to pay? Wouldn't that have to be satisfied before they get to their equity?
Yes.
Yeah. So like if
Yes. So they
she-
won't get any equity if they have more liens than equity.
Right.
Right.
You talking
And
about the seller.
No.
And you may still have to negotiate.
Yeah, because like if someone owes $300 to the IRS and she's only buying a house for $200,000,
Mm-hmm.
the IRS has to give like a partial release,
Yes.
so they can only collect the $200,000 for the
Right.
payoff. But I think what's more important is not just the liens, it's the timing. Because let's say your buyer is buying it and they're trying to exercise their
They're
right
ready
to
to go.
buy it
Yeah.
in January, and the seller just passed.
Mm.
Now we all have to wait through probate, and the buyer's going to be mad at her because it's like, hey, I'm ready to go and you're not. So that
Mhm.
protects her
It could,
because
yeah.
title is not clear.
Well, that would
yet.
be where you're saying it's pro buyer. Because with that being in there, now they have an option to stay or leave. Okay, this is going on over here. We can still sell you the property.
Yep.
It may take us a
Right.
little bit more time. And now they can say, no, I want my $5,500. Or, sure, I'll wait. And then you do an extension agreement or something.
I think you could do, sure. I think the biggest issue that could happen to you is that the seller just refuses to sell.
And
Maybe
but
it was
now
worth
you have-
200 in the beginning and now it's worth 400.
Yeah.
That's a
and
suit
now you
for
got it.
specific performance or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can, but
But
again,
then-
you got this buyer ready to close and now I got to sue the seller, which I would in that
Right.
case. I
Right.
would. I haven't had that. I've had people kind of try to get out with things like that or have a discussion about that. And then it's like, hey, well, we're going to get an attorney. Okay, great. Get your attorney.
Right.
Mhm.
Do you want him to talk to mine?
Right.
And then usually that kind of, but I don't do it like in a rude way. I try to work it out,
Mm.
Right.
you know, because you want it not hostile. You really,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
what Janita was saying, so basically what you were saying is, no, that doesn't prevent what you were asking about the secondary liens coming behind yours, because Wendy's still in the first lien position, right? Unless it's taxes
Right.
or maybe the IRS.
Yeah.
And but yes, those other liens are still being placed on the property.
Yeah, they're
and-
still going to take any equity.
yeah, but they're gonna come behind hers, but it can delay it,
Right.
not stop
Yeah.
the sale, and
And,
then that could kill the deal.
It
Right.
could kill it. Or the person refuses to sell. Or you find out right before closing
Mm.
who you bought it from is not the only owner.
Mm.
Oh yeah, it's the second.
It's their
yeah.
aunt and them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And now the aunt doesn't want to sell. Guess what? Yeah, we own the deal.
But they should be doing a title search.
You
if they're
should.
going, if
Investor.
you're going to go out as
Yep.
an investor
Yep.
and try Lease Options as your
Yep.
investment vehicle, then you still should involve a title company and get a title examination.
Absolutely.
100%.
I'd pay for it.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't guarantee
Like
everything.
Wendy,
in title
like, yeah, come to
examination.
Legacy.
Come to Legacy. But it doesn't give you like a for sure clear to go, right?
Mhm.
But what it does do is it gives you 99%,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
Right.
what's
You
out
did your
there.
due diligence. You did as much
Yeah,
as
because
you
if
could.
you don't have
Yeah.
a policy, they're not going to insure it. But, you know, they're,
Right.
you know, if they miss something, they're not going to promise
Because
that.
it's not a purchase at that time, so
Right.
there's no insurance to cover you. But at least
But
you
if you
have
did want
the
to,
information.
that cost around about, are you, because you, wait, you,
170
No,
75
she
bucks
can
or
do
something.
the search. She
Wait a
can't
minute.
get it insured.
can you insure can the person buy insurance
Not,
for?
Not
no,
the
not on
investment,
a,
lease, or
not unless it's
option.
a purchase.
Yeah,
They
that's
can,
what
like a
makes the
sub
question.
two, they can. Subject
Okay.
to.
Okay.
Because that is a true purchase. You're buying it. You're
'Cause
getting
I've
the
had-
title.
Mm.
Okay. So I'm considering things here in my mind.
Yeah.
And-
Yeah, you probably run a lot of investors are going to run across deals that maybe this is where I find these two techniques, subject twos and lease options,
Mhm.
really working well, is where a lot of investors are looking at an opportunity where a seller's motivated, maybe not fully distressed, but they're motivated. They need to get out for some reason.
Right.
Maybe they inherited the property. Maybe they bought their new one. The old one hasn't sold. Maybe they built their new one. Their old one hasn't sold. Usually they can afford both. That's why I'm looking for that for the lease option. Now, sub 2 could be totally distressed, as long as you get them off and get title insurance.
Yeah.
But these are strategies that sometimes you're not going to have as much equity in potentially than you would if you're going to fix and flip. You have to have equity, right? If you're paying cash for a deal and you're going to fix and flip it, you have to get a good deal in price.
Right.
But when it comes to these strategies, you may not get as good of a price, but there's other terms.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at the whole picture of a lease option.
Yeah.
So price is like only one part of it. That's why I was saying like long-term. Let's say my seller, let's the shocker, you're still going to stay the seller, okay? You're the seller and I get 10 years with you. And my payment is, say, $1,200 a month. And he owns a free and clear or he has a lot of equity, whatever.
Right.
And my $1,200 a month I get negotiated, that's going toward the purchase price.
Okay.
So in that case, I may not want to offer this to this person here for 18 months because that might be the only 18 months I get of that $1,200. Whereas if I just lease it to them, I get the cash flow. Let that $1,200, that's my building up my net worth by $1,200 a month. And it's building up the equity in that property. Right. So I might keep this rented over here for longer. So it just kind of depends on what I'm getting with the owner.
Right.
But in that case, Shaka might be like, no, I have to have $250. Like I'm not taking a dime less. And maybe it's only really worth about $250. I might do that deal in these cases if the rent is fairly reasonable
right.
and it's all going toward the purchase price.
I got 2 questions. Can I ask?
We got 19 minutes. Ask your questions, and then I got 3.
Okay, and just real quick on that asking for people. I'll say I when I talk to you about it, Shaka, I might be like, so you want $1,200 and you're willing to sell this? Oh yeah, and so then I would say, and look, this is how I'm doing it. You guys can you even see me on this? Will they be able to see me?
Yeah.
I look and I go, so I assume that the $1,200 goes towards the purchase price, right? What else did you want to show me in the house?
Right.
So I may try to get that down because I'm like, or they might go, I don't know, and I go, well, I've heard that's the way it goes.
Okay.
Like they don't know they don't know I've done like hundreds of these things. Right. I'm not telling them that. I'm not telling them I'm some expert on this.
What if they say no?
Then I'd go, oh, well, usually they might say something like, I can't give you all $1,200. I go, well, what could you give me? And I wait. Sometimes it's half. And I go, well, let me think about that. I thought more of it would go toward it, but would you do like 60%?
Gotcha.
I might try to negotiate and have a little fun with them. But okay, go ahead. Your question.
No, so
those are key. Like if you could just hear what I just said about that negotiating that rent toward the purchase.
Right.
Going towards the purchase. So you're knocking down the
huge.
Yes.
Huge. So this is why price is not always the issue if you can get these other terms. Like I can get that plus the rent is lower than normal, so I have a good spread. Plus I got long term. I mean, if you can do all of those things in there,
she's winning.
Win, like a big deal. Ding, 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 ding.
The price appreciate. That's the killer.
She getting money
right there.
I mean, she's building equity already because they're paying towards the principal. So they're paying the principal down, and then depending on how much she's renting it up for,
she's getting cash flow.
She's getting cash flow.
And usually, I don't put anything down usually. And usually, I'm getting 3 to 5% of the purchase price. So if I'm selling it for $200, my buyer is going to put down about $6 to $10,000.
Gotcha. And that's your money.
And I get it right up front.
So you
get money up front every month and on the back end.
So that's
3 ways you get paid.
So if it's all going towards the purchase price, that's technically like an interest-only loan where you just you're buying a house just monthly payment. Yes, all principal.
But wait, yes, and it's better than that. It's actually negative. You know why? It's negative interest. You know why?
Because you're getting money.
No, because I'm getting all $1,200 toward it. But get this, they're still paying taxes and insurance.
Oh yeah.
Sheesh. So, because it's not escrow.
That's right. No, even if it is, it doesn't matter. I mean,
because
they own it.
Right?
Yeah, you're
they still paying those two expenses. So if you think about it, they're not subtracting that from the payment.
Yes.
That's your question.
And that happens a lot. But go ahead.
So I got 2 quick ones. First one is
I'll come back to you.
How often do you buy what? In what situation would you buy in second lien position when they already have a mortgage?
Oh, all the time. Most of them have a mortgage.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
but I want them to have some equity because otherwise, if they don't have equity,
Mhm.
there's nothing for me to get.
Right.
I can't negotiate something with the payment and end up where it's upside down, right?
Right.
So I have to get something where I can chip away at that equity during the option period.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then last question is, how often do you purchase where you have to do work to get it to rental?
Not very
to be
often.
rentable? Okay.
Very rare have I ever done that. And the reason is I don't want to put a lot of money into something I don't
Your
know.
own. Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So I wanted to just make sure you're able to hit on like the pros, the cons, maybe do like a summary of like the lease options.
Yep. Okay, so the pros of buying on option, one of the big issues, one of the biggest things is, guys, no matter what happens in the market, if you option that property, you're in a good position. If the market goes up, you got equity. If it goes down, you don't have to buy.
Right.
If it stays the same, you might be good or you might be okay. You still don't have to buy, but you'd be really good even if, like in this case, where that 1,200 is going toward it.
Mhm.
If it didn't even go up, you're still in a good position because you built up some equity. So you get to decide. That's the very biggest pro. It's the safest way to invest, in my opinion, because I don't have to buy it. I'm not on a mortgage. I'm not on a title, but I get all the benefits of ownership. I mean,
And
not
control,
the write-offs
right.
per se. I'm writing off my 100% of my, rent,
Right.
right? But I'm paying income on the 100% of the rent I'm getting. So there's some things like that. The other thing is that option fee that you're getting up front from the tenant buyer, that is yours to use from day one. You don't have to put it in a separate account like a security deposit or keep it separate. However, it is not taxable to you until one of two events occurs. Either they exercise or they default.
Mm.
So the tax year in which that happens is when that money is now taxable to you. So I might get 10 grand right now, but I don't pay taxes on it. It's on my books as a liability. It's in my QuickBooks, right? But it's not taxable until they walk away and say, I'm not buying. Then it comes back in there as not a liability, but as an income category. Or it gets applied toward them buying, and then you get taxed when you're on the purchase end. So I hope that helps with that part.
Yeah. And then
So that's the pros. Do you want the cons?
yes, please.
The cons, if the tenant does trash it, you'd have to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the biggest things, or you have to evict them. I mean, you are a landlord.
Right.
So, it's not any different than being a landlord in that regard. That's the biggest con, I would say. There's really not too many cons with them.
Okay.
Other than that, if they don't pay you on time, you still got to pay. But again, there's other strategies you can do to mitigate that.
Yeah.
Where like, hey, I get one time a year that I don't have to pay you if for any reason my tenant doesn't, I can prove it.
Okay.
Or, but you have to put it in writing. I don't use that because I can pay them and I never did use that, but I teach that so people know there's other things they can do.
Yeah. I wanted to hear about maybe a recent lease option that you've done. I would say within the last maybe 5 to 7 years that you felt like was really successful because you were able to lease it at this dollar amount, successfully sandwich lease it,
Yeah.
and then successfully close on it, but also your profit was grand.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you, like a favorite
Yeah.
one that has
So
happened.
I have one of my favorite ones. I love this, and it's in my book actually. But it's one of my favorite ones because it really gives a whole picture of the sandwich lease option. And it was a woman who had this property. It's up in Clarkston area. It was on a couple acres. It had an outbuilding, couple 2,200 square foot. It was a single woman who owned it. She tried to sell it, couldn't sell it at like $189,900. And this was a couple of years back, right? But she answered my ad in the, well, it wasn't the newspaper. I don't remember. Like she called my ad somewhere off the internet or whatever.
Right.
And she said, she goes, hey, my ad basically said, looking for 3 to 4 rentals for long-term, for my portfolio or whatever.
Right.
And so she called me on that, and we started talking. And bottom line is, I said, "Would you consider selling it?" She goes, "Well, I've been trying to sell it. It didn't sell. That's why I called you." Bingo. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. So so I said, "Well, okay. Well, tell me about the deal." And she goes, "Well, I'm not going to sell for less than $185." So in my mind, I'm like, "Wait a minute. With my 3% commission, you'd be getting less than 185, lady.
Right.
But I'm thinking, okay, wait, let me not get stuck on the price. Let me continue to go through it. So I go, okay, well, how much per month would you need? It was like $1,200. Okay, right around the $1,200. So I was like, oh, okay, let me see. Let me go see it. Let me check it out. And I go, why are you moving? She goes, I have a shoulder issue. I've had like 20 surgeries. It's just too much for me to keep up with now. But she had perfect credit. No, she wasn't behind. She's like, I'm just going to go rent a lakefront house. I just need a serene lakefront living. Anyways, fast forward. We were signing the deal on a Sunday. And I remember I put the ad in about the lease option available. And I had a lady call me and I said, look, tell me your situation, tenant. She goes, well, I got some credit issues. And I go, why? She goes, well, I lost my job a while back, blah, blah, blah. And I go, is it good sense? Yep. Okay. I go, what else? She goes, I got 7 dogs. I go, 7 dogs? She goes, well, they're little and they're really expensive. They're like $2,000 or $3,000 each. I mean, they're like little guys. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Well, it is country, Okay. So I'm thinking, and she goes, and I got 10 grand down.
Oh, wow.
And I go, huh. So I sold it to her for $225. I bought it for $185. She paid $1,500 a month, got 0 credits. I didn't get any real good credits, I don't think, from the salary there on this one. But it was like, $300 or $400 a month difference. I got 10 grand up front and $40-some thousand at the closing. And by the way, this house appraised for more than $225 when she bought it.
Wow.
So the buyer bought
Because
it.
it was out in the country.
Too,
so
right.
she was like thrilled. It was like $260 or something. And I'm like, what? I should have sold it for more. And I'm like, no, pigs get fed, hogs go to slaughter. But it didn't sell on the MLS. It didn't sell on the MLS, but she got it to appraise for more. I mean, when it actually came down to it, because it was in the country, sometimes those weird properties like lakefronts, country lots, they have like the comps are not so easy. So the appraisal could be strong for the buyer,
Yeah.
They have a little more leeway, I think, in those. But anyway, so she was thrilled. I was thrilled. And you know what happened? This is crazy. I kept in the seller. She called me back like a year later, 2 years later. She goes, okay, I'm ready to move off the lake and I'm ready to buy another house. But I screwed up my credit while I was gone and I need a lease option from you. She became my tenant buyer on a different house.
So how long did
Isn't that crazy? If you take care of someone, you do the right
crazy.
thing and you
come back. Business comes back. But how long would you say that transaction was from the tenant buyer?
I think it was like 15 months or something.
Oh, so she had time to get
Most
her
of my
credit
people most people need about 18 months to 24.
Yeah.
I don't give them longer than 24, you guys, because even with like a bankruptcy, I think, is it FHA, is it 2 years or 3?
2 years from
2
discharge,
years.
FHA.
Right.
So why would I give them longer?
Yeah.
I mean, and if they had a foreclosure, I don't know how, foreclosure.
3
They're
years.
going to be three to 5 years,
Yep.
depending on the type
Yeah,
of
so
loan
it's
they're
probably
getting.
not going to be a foreclosure person anymore with that change in the rule. But bankruptcy a lot. I've sold to hundreds of people with bankruptcy.
So they're working with you in credit repair, or are you sending somebody?
Sometimes I used to.
Oh, okay.
I used to send them to credit repair because I had a company that I had part of it in there and I had to deal with them or something. But I don't know that they really need that. Usually if they just pay their bills.
You don't even
Yeah.
care because you just keep paying the rent at least.
Just pay their rent. And here's the other thing, like if they don't pay or, by the way, only 50% of people actually buy.
Right.
Over the years. That's my history. And I'm talking nicer homes. These are not, by the way, I don't do first time home. I try to do like medium price range home. So for me, where I am, that would be like $250 maybe, that kind of range. I don't do $100,000 homes. I don't do my low end in Pontiac because that's more of a renter area and they never exercise. And you might think, well, that's great. I don't think that's great because for me, that's not great. I don't feel right about taking their money if I know they're never going to exercise. Now, if they screw up and they don't exercise, but they have the right to, ability to, and smarts to do it, I'm totally fine keeping their money. I have no problem with that. But if I know pretty much they really are never going to, they got bad credit, they have bad credit, they always have bad credit, they never have anything but bad credit, I'm not going to sell to them on an option.
But you still were rent. Well, that's crazy though, because you're still renting to them.
No.
Oh, you wouldn't even do it at all.
I wouldn't
But
tell me either.
the goal sounds like you renting to people that are really intentional about buying and becoming a homeowner.
Yeah.
Like if that's not their end goal.
50-50. They're 50-50.
That's right.
Yeah, but if it's not their end goal.
Because something happens. They get divorced in the meantime. They lose their job. They get transferred. I mean, things happen in those 2 years, sometimes a year and a half. They have twins and they don't have enough room, whatever it might be.
So she's saying even though that benefits her, financially, she doesn't feel morally right.
Morally.
But
Right.
knowing that she's taking somebody's
option fee.
Yeah,
I
their
will.
option fee.
If I know
If
you
you
have
think
the
you-
ability and you
Mhm.
are on a good track and you turned around whatever caused the credit issue to begin with, no problem. I have no problem taking your money. I won't even blink twice about it, or think twice about it. But I won't take advantage of you knowing that you can't get it. Never,
Right.
never. That's a no in my mind.
Right.
So we saw this. Reggie sent this video of the guy that had how many years on the
Oh, a
lease?
60-year
A
lease.
60-year
What?
lease.
I watch a lot of these court cases on all the court cases are on Zoom now. So this guy lied and said I don't know if he lied. He said he had a 60-year lease with somebody and the amount was so ridiculous. The judge was like, why didn't you just buy a house? Because he said he gave the guy like $200,000 down or something. It was ridiculous. But they didn't have any documents to support it.
Well, that's the thing. Usually people call me and they go, like the tenant buyers are like, I had an option before and they screwed me. I said, well, wait a minute. What did you have it all in writing? No, but it was you didn't have anything then.
Yeah, you don't have.
When you buy from me, you have a contract. Everything's in writing. Everything's signed by me. You don't have to worry about that.
Right.
But what if that guy had a lease option? Maybe
he didn't have any paperwork.
He would have been fine.
See, that's the problem. You got nothing if it's verbal or what you think it is. You got to have proof.
The two most confusing things with real estate is the land contract and lease options. People get them so confused.
Yeah.
First, they get them confused, but you ask people, everybody that got screwed, they got screwed because their paperwork wasn't right or they didn't have paperwork at all or documents were not recorded.
Usually that's the case. They don't have documents.
Yeah.
They think or even people that, like, I've had people, I said sometimes at the end, they'll be like, well, I gave you $5,000 and I'm going to take you to court or something. I'm like, okay. They can't find their documents. They don't even have them. And they are signed. And I'm like, I'll send them to you and tell me where your attorney is. I'll send them to them too.
Right.
I got them for you. Like, I keep them,
Right.
I have I want you to tell us about some of the things that you want people to pay attention to your books, title, the investor meeting, where to find you, and all that stuff.
Okay, so if you're local in Michigan, or even if you're investing here, come to MichiganRealEstateInvestors.com, or it's also Detroit REIA.com. Go to it too. That's our monthly meeting where we have different topics. You guys have all been, and where we have different topics about real estate investing, whether you're a beginner or advanced, or just different topics you want to learn about. To me, the more you know, the more you can do.
Right.
Even if you don't always do them. Like I never was an expert in everything. I'm still not. I know enough about a lot that I can figure out other things, but I know where my wheelhouse is, right? So that is where you can find me at the local meetings. My website's wendypatton.com, and you can find my books on Amazon. And I'm local, and I'm usually in Arizona in the winter, but I come back every month for the meetings, and I try to, I'm partly retired now.
Okay.
It's really fun. Yeah, I'm working like 10, 20 hours a week now.
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All righty, guys. That's a wrap.
Monday.